The Alveric Dominion's insignia, a black crown encased in a fiery halo, loomed over the crumbling skyline of New London. Once the beating heart of humanity's industrial age, the city now lay in ruin, its inhabitants reduced to servitude under alien overseers. Patrol drones hummed through the air, scanning for any signs of rebellion. On every corner, Dominion enforcers stood watch, their gleaming black armor reflecting the pale light of Earth's polluted skies. Captain Elias Ward watched from the shadows of a derelict factory, his jaw clenched. His once proud Earth, home to visionaries and dreamers, had been turned into a prison. He scanned the bustling square below, where Dominion guards herded humans like cattle. The announcement of a public execution had drawn a crowd, a mandatory attendance to remind Earth's population of its place beneath the boot of the Dominion. Elias, a voice whispered through his earpiece, "The broadcast begins in 5 minutes. Are you sure about this?" Elias touched the hidden device at his ear. "We need this, Zara. The people need to see that resistance isn't just a dream. Hold your position." Across the square, Commander Zara Khalid crouched in the shadow of a broken monument, her sniper rifle trained on the platform where 3 rebels knelt, bound, and beaten. Their faces were bloodied, but their gazes were defiant as they stared at the approaching executioner. Elias adjusted his hood and descended the crumbling staircase, blending into the crowd. The air was heavy with fear, yet murmurs of anger rippled through the gathered humans. The Dominion's propaganda, blaring from holographic screens above, declared the rebels as terrorists. But here, on Earth, they were heroes. A towering Alveric overseer, draped in flowing crimson robes, stepped onto the platform. Its voice boomed across the square, translated by embedded devices in every human's ear. "Behold the price of defiance," it proclaimed. "These traitors sought to sow chaos within the Dominion, to challenge the order we have bestowed upon your broken world. Let this serve as a reminder." The overseer's speech was cut short by a deafening explosion. Smoke erupted from the northern perimeter, sending the crowd into chaos. Screams and shouts echoed as Dominion enforcers scrambled to contain the panic. Now, Elias barked into his earpiece. Zara's rifle fired with a sharp crack, and the overseer crumpled to the ground. The guards turned, searching for the source of the attack, but their movements were sluggish and confused, a result of the signal jammer Elias had planted hours before. Elias sprinted through the chaos, dodging panicked civilians and weaving between guards. He vaulted onto the platform, slamming into the executioner and freeing the first prisoner with a swift motion. "Get to the evac point," he ordered, shoving a weapon into the rebels' hands. As the resistance fighters rallied and began their escape, Elias turned to the crowd, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. "This is just the beginning," he shouted. "Earth will rise again." For a brief moment, silence fell over the square. Then, a ripple of defiance spread through the onlookers, their fear replaced by a spark of hope. Elias knew this wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. Behind him, Dominion reinforcements poured into the square. Elias gripped his weapon and prepared for the fight ahead, a fire burning in his chest. Humanity's chains had begun to crack. The hideout beneath the ruins of old Paris was a stark contrast to the Dominion's cold, mechanical order. Warm light from salvaged lanterns cast flickering shadows on the walls, and the air was thick with tension and determination. Resistance fighters buzzed around a table littered with maps, schematics, and weapons. At the center stood Captain Elias Ward, his sharp gaze fixed on a holographic projection of a Dominion supply convoy. "Operation Ember," Elias began, his voice steady. "The Dominion relies on this convoy to supply their outposts across Earth. If we take it, we disrupt their operations and gain resources for ourselves. But this isn't just about supplies, it's about sending a message." Zara Khalid leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And the message is what? That we can poke the beast and survive. Elias turned to her, his expression hard. "Know that we can bleed the beast. The Dominion isn't invincible, and we're going to prove it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, though the unease was palpable. Everyone knew the risks. The Dominion was a force of overwhelming power, and any failure would mean swift and brutal retribution. "The convoy moves through Sector 7 in 12 hours, Elias continued. "We'll strike at the narrow pass here." He pointed to a choke point marked on the map. "It's a risky spot for them, and with the right explosives, we can trap them. Zara will lead the sniper team, covering our flanks. My team will handle the explosives and the ground assault. Any questions?" "What about civilians?" asked Micah, a young mechanic who had joined the resistance after her family was taken by the Dominion. "The Dominion doesn't care who gets caught in the crossfire." Elias's jaw tightened. "We minimize collateral damage. This is war, but we fight for the people, not against them." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the group. After a moment, Zara nodded. "All right, let's light the fire." 12 hours later, the rebels lay in wait. Hidden among the crags of the narrow pass, they watched as the convoy approached, a line of sleek black hover trucks flanked by Dominion enforcers on speeders. Overhead, drones patrolled the skies, their red scanning beams cutting through the darkness. Elias crouched behind a boulder, his hand resting on the detonator. Through his earpiece, Zara's calm voice came through. "Sniper team in position. 2 guards on the ridge, 3 near the lead truck." "Copy," Elias replied. "On my mark." The convoy entered the choke point, the sound of engines reverberating off the canyon walls. Elias counted silently, waiting for the perfect moment. Mark. The explosion was deafening, a fiery bloom that sent the lead truck careening into the rocky walls. Chaos erupted as Dominion guards scrambled to respond. Zara's sniper rifle cracked, taking out a drone mid-scan, while her team picked off enforcers. Elias led the charge, his team surging from their hiding spots. Blaster fire lit up the night as the rebels clashed with Dominion forces. Micah, clutching a makeshift EMP device, darted under one of the trucks and disabled its engines, leaving it dead in the water. The battle was brutal and fast. The rebels' coordinated attack overwhelmed the Dominion forces, who were unprepared for such an audacious strike. Within minutes, the convoy was theirs. "Secure the cargo," Elias shouted, his voice cutting through the din. Rebels pried open the hover trucks, revealing crates of weapons, medical supplies, and a mysterious Dominion data core. Elias's eyes narrowed as he inspected the device. "Zara," he called, holding up the core, "I think we just found our next move." Above the canyon, distant Dominion reinforcements loomed. The rebels worked quickly, loading their spoils onto their stolen vehicles. "Time to go," Zara barked, covering their retreat with precise sniper fire. As the rebels disappeared into the night, Elias allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The flames of rebellion had been ignited, and there was no turning back. The rebel hideout was a flurry of activity as Elias and his team returned with their prize. Crates of supplies were hauled into storage, while tech experts crowded around the Dominion data core, their faces illuminated by its pulsing blue glow. The air buzzed with cautious excitement. Their successful ambush had been a bold strike against the Dominion, but everyone knew retaliation was inevitable. Elias stood at the center of the chaos, his mind racing. He glanced at Zara, who was leaning over the tech team's shoulder, studying the data core. "Any luck cracking it?" Elias asked. Zara straightened, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not yet. Dominion encryption is like nothing we've seen before. But if we can decode it, we might find out why that convoy was so heavily guarded." Before Elias could respond, a distant rumble shook the ground. The faint sound of engines grew louder, followed by a blaring alarm. "Perimeter breach," shouted a scout from the entrance. "Dominion forces incoming." Panic rippled through the hideout. Fighters scrambled for weapons, and civilians fled deeper into the tunnels. Elias grabbed his rifle and barked orders. Zara, get the data core secured and out of here. Micah, set the charges on our escape routes. Everyone else, defensive positions now. The hideout's entrance erupted into chaos as Dominion enforcers poured in, their black armor glinting under the glow of plasma fire. The rebels fought back fiercely, using the narrow tunnels to their advantage. Elias crouched behind a makeshift barricade, firing bursts from his rifle. His shots were precise, each one aimed to slow the enemy's advance. Beside him, Micah worked furiously, planting explosives along the tunnel walls. "This is getting ugly," Micah shouted over the noise. "It's supposed to," Elias replied, gritting his teeth. "We hold them here as long as we can." Deeper in the hideout, Zara and her team worked to transport the data core to safety. Sweat beaded on her brow as she shouted instructions, coordinating the evacuation. Every second counted. Suddenly, a Dominion officer stepped into view, a hulking figure clad in crimson-trimmed armor. It raised its arm, unleashing a concussive blast that sent rebels flying. Elias's heart sank. An Alveric commander. "Fall back," Elias yelled, firing at the armored behemoth. His shots barely left a mark. The commander's voice boomed, translated into human language. "Rebels of Earth, surrender now. Resistance is futile." Elias clenched his fists. Not today. As the rebels retreated, Micah triggered the explosives, collapsing the tunnels behind them. The Dominion forces were momentarily stalled, but it wouldn't last. In the chaos, Zara and her team slipped away with the data core, disappearing into the labyrinth of tunnels that stretched beneath the city. Elias regrouped with the remaining fighters at a hidden exit, his chest heaving. They had lost the hideout, but the rebellion had survived, barely. As they melted into the night, Elias's mind burned with determination. The Dominion had struck back, but they had underestimated Earth's resolve. The data core was their beacon of hope, and Elias knew they would need every ounce of courage and ingenuity to turn the tide of this war. The safe house was little more than an abandoned subway station, deep beneath the ruins of old Paris, but it provided the rebels a brief respite. Dim lights flickered as Zara and the tech team worked feverishly on the Dominion data core. The rest of the group stood watch, their nerves frayed from the constant threat of pursuit. Elias leaned against a cracked pillar, his eyes scanning the room. Every face told a story: grief, determination, fear. They had all lost something to the Dominion, but tonight they had a chance to gain something invaluable. "How's it going?" Elias asked, stepping over to Zara. Zara didn't look up, her fingers flying across the interface of a salvaged terminal. "It's slow. Dominion encryption isn't just tough, it's designed to kill the system if we mess up. One wrong move, and this core fries itself." Micah sat nearby, tinkering with a makeshift EMP grenade. "Great, so we've got a ticking time bomb that doesn't even tick." Elias shot her a look, but before he could reply, Zara let out a triumphant gasp. "Got something," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. The data core hummed, and a holographic display sprang to life, casting blue light across the room. Lines of alien script scrolled rapidly, interspersed with maps and schematics. "What is it?" Elias asked, stepping closer. Zara's eyes darted across the display. Coordinates, supply routes, and wait. She froze, then began furiously typing. "What?" Elias pressed, his voice low. Zara's face was pale when she turned to him. "It's not just supply routes, it's troop movements and tactical plans. The Dominion is preparing a massive offensive, something big, and it's not just Earth. They're planning to crush every resistance cell in the sector." A heavy silence fell over the room as the weight of her words sank in. Elias's jaw tightened. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Zara said grimly. "A week, maybe 2. If we don't warn the others, they'll be wiped out. Mika stood, her grenade forgotten. Then what are we waiting for? We've got the intel. Let's get it to the other cells. It's not that simple, Zora interjected. The Dominion has been tracking data leaks like this. If we broadcast it, they'll pinpoint our location in minutes. We need a secure relay, and the only one capable of sending this safely is in Sector 14, a Dominion stronghold. Ilias crossed his arms, his mind racing. Then we take the stronghold. Zara stared at him. Elias, that's suicide. We barely survived the convoy raid, and now you want to storm a Dominion fortress. Ilias met her gaze, his voice steady. If we don't, the rebellion dies. Every cell, every fighter, every civilian who dares to hope. This isn't just about us anymore. The room was silent, the enormity of the task settling on them. Then, one by one, the rebels nodded. Mika grinned, her hands on her hips. Guess we'd better start planning. Sector 14 isn't going to take itself. Zara sighed, a wry smile tugging at her lips. You're all insane, but I guess that's what makes us human. Elias turned to the group, his voice firm. We move at dawn. Let's show the Dominion what Earth can do. As the rebels began preparing for their most dangerous mission yet, Elias allowed himself a brief moment of hope. The road ahead was perilous, but for the first time, they held the upper hand. The shattered crown of the Dominion was within reach. They just had to seize it. Dawn broke over the jagged skyline of Sector 14, casting long shadows across the Dominion stronghold. The fortress loomed like a mechanical behemoth, its walls bristling with weaponry and patrols. High above, sleek Dominion drones hummed through the air, scanning for threats. To attack such a place seemed impossible, but impossible was a word the rebels had long since discarded. Elias crouched with his team in the ruins of a nearby industrial complex, the fortress in clear view. They had spent the night studying the schematics Zora had pulled from the data core, identifying weak points and patrol patterns. All right, Elias whispered, his voice carrying the weight of leadership. We've got one shot at this. Zara, you and Mika will handle the infiltration. Take out the relay guards and prep the system. The rest of us will create enough chaos to keep the Dominion busy. Everyone clear? The group nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Mika smirked, twirling a detonator in her hand. Chaos is my specialty. Ilias grinned despite himself. I'm counting on it. Moments later, the team moved out, splitting into two groups. Zara and Mika slipped into the shadows, their figures vanishing among the rubble. Ilias led the larger force toward the fortress, their movements careful but deliberate. As they approached, Dominion patrols began to close in. Elias raised his fist, signaling the rebels to hold. He watched the patrol's path, counting the seconds. Now he hissed. The rebels sprang into action, silencing the guards before an alarm could be raised. Elias motioned them forward, each step bringing them closer to the fortress walls. Inside the fortress, Zara and Mika crept through dimly lit corridors, their breaths shallow. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the sharp scent of ozone. Two guards up ahead, Zara whispered, her eyes fixed on a pair of Dominion soldiers stationed at the relay room door. Mika grinned, pulling a smoke grenade from her belt. Time for some fun. The grenade rolled across the floor, hissing as it erupted in a cloud of thick, acrid smoke. The guards stumbled, their visors struggling to adapt. Zora moved like a shadow, dispatching them with swift, silent precision. The relay room door slid open with a hiss, revealing a chamber filled with Dominion technology. Zora immediately set to work, her fingers flying across the terminal. Back outside, the distraction team made their move. Explosions rocked the fortress as Mika's charges went off, shattering walls and disrupting patrols. Dominion forces scrambled, their coordination faltering in the chaos. Elias led the charge, his rifle blazing. Every shot counted, every step bringing them closer to their goal. Inside the relay room, Zora's voice crackled over the comms. "We're in. Uploading the intel now." "Make it fast," Elias replied, ducking behind cover as Dominion reinforcements poured in. Zora's heart pounded as progress bars filled the screen. Almost there, suddenly alarms blared. The Fortress AI had detected the breach. "We've got incoming," Mecca shouted, her voice tense. Elias clenched his jaw. "Hold the line. Give Zara time." The rebels fought with everything they had, the Dominion's forces closing in. But despite the odds, Elias refused to yield. The shattered crown of the Dominion was within their grasp, and Earth's defiance burned brighter than ever. The fortress walls shook with the force of explosions as Elias and his team held their ground, the sound of gunfire ringing out in every direction. The Dominion forces, initially disoriented by the chaos, were beginning to regroup, pushing back against the rebels' resistance with a terrifying efficiency. But the rebels weren't backing down. Elias crouched behind a half-destroyed generator, his breath coming in quick gasps as he scanned the battlefield. His team was spread out, fighting tooth and nail to maintain control of the outer perimeter. The Dominion soldiers were relentless, but the rebels were fueled by something far stronger: hope. Zora's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got the intel. Upload complete. The relay's down, but the Dominion is coming in hard. You need to get to us now." Elias's grip tightened around his rifle. "We're on our way." He motioned to Mecca, who was perched on a nearby rooftop, providing sniper cover for the team. "Mecca, give us a clean shot to Zora's position." Mecca's voice came through calm and precise. "Covering you. Go." The rebels surged forward, using the rubble and wreckage as cover. Every step was met with enemy fire, but they pushed on, the promise of victory urging them forward. Elias spotted Zora and Mecca ahead, surrounded by the Dominion's heavy forces, but they were fighting with everything they had. Elias sprinted forward, ducking behind a column, as a blast of energy whizzed past his head. He shot back at the advancing Dominion troops, his focus unyielding. With a shout, he signaled to the rest of the team to flank the enemy. The rebels closed the distance, pushing their way through the fortress's inner sanctum. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning metal. The echo of their struggle filled the corridors, drowning out all other sounds. Elias could hear his heart pounding in his chest as he led the charge, knowing that every moment counted. Finally, they reached Zara and Mecca, who were holed up in a reinforced room at the heart of the fortress. The relay had been destroyed, but the real battle was just beginning. The remaining Dominion forces had gathered in force, preparing for a final decisive strike. "They're coming in fast," Mecca shouted, her sniper rifle blazing as another soldier fell. Zura's fingers were still on the control panel, her face set in grim determination. "I've initiated the system lockdown, but it's not enough to buy us time. We need to move." Elias scanned the room, formulating a plan. "We'll take the fight to them. If we can destroy the command center, it'll cripple their operations in the sector." "But that's deep within the fortress," Zura protested, her eyes wide with concern. Elias grinned, a fire in his eyes. "Exactly, and that's where we're going." The team gathered, preparing for the final push. The Dominion might have been prepared for an assault, but they were about to experience something they'd never anticipated: humanity's refusal to surrender. With a roar, the rebels surged forward once again, blasting their way deeper into the fortress. Every hallway was a battlefield, every room a potential graveyard. The Dominion fought with ferocity, but the rebels had something they didn't: unity, resolve, and the burning desire to tear down the empire that had destroyed their worlds. The command center was within sight, and as Elias led the charge, he felt the weight of what was to come. The fate of Earth's rebellion rested on their shoulders. If they could strike at the heart of the Dominion, they might just shatter the Empire's hold on the galaxy forever. The final stretch to the Dominion's command center felt like an eternity. The rebels, battle-worn but undeterred, pushed forward through the fortress's labyrinthine hallways, their steps swift and sure despite the increasing resistance. With every blast of gunfire and exchange of blows, the tension mounted. This was no longer a raid. This was a war for the galaxy's future. Elias led the charge, his heart pounding as they neared the command center's reinforced door. Behind them, explosions reverberated throughout the fortress as the rebels fought off the Dominion forces that still pursued them. The walls trembled, but Elias's focus never wavered. They couldn't stop now, not when victory was within their grasp. Mika, perched by the entrance, peered around the corner and then signaled the others. Clear, for now. Zara and the others took their positions, weapons aimed at the door as Elias approached the control panel. The door was massive, sealed shut by a thick blast door designed to withstand even the heaviest of assaults. But they'd made it this far. "Ready?" Elias asked, his voice low. Zara glanced at the timer on her wrist. "Ready, let's finish this." Elias didn't hesitate. He pressed the button, triggering a series of powerful explosives to rip through the door's locking mechanisms. The explosion rocked the hall, sending echoes through the fortress. The door groaned, buckled, and then collapsed inward with a massive crash. Without a second thought, the rebels rushed in, guns raised. The command center was a vast chamber, illuminated by the eerie glow of countless holographic displays. Dominion officers and technicians scrambled to react, their surprise quickly giving way to panic. But they weren't prepared for what was about to come. Mako was the first to move, firing with precision at the officers stationed near the central command array. Zara followed, securing the perimeter while Elias advanced to the command console. "Take out the officers," Elias shouted as he crouched behind a nearby terminal. He quickly began downloading critical data, the interface flashing with lines of Dominion encryption. Time was slipping away. They had to disable the system before reinforcements arrived. The battle raged around him, but Elias's focus never left the screen. His fingers danced over the console, hacking into the Dominion's central grid. He could hear the sound of weapons firing, the grunts of battle, but it all faded into the background. His mission was clear. This was the heart of the Dominion's control, and if he could sever its connections to the fleet, Earth would have its best chance of victory. Behind him, Meko took down another wave of Dominion officers. Zora moved like a shadow, neutralizing the last of the technicians who had been trying to trigger a lockdown. The command center was now in their hands. Come on, Ilias muttered under his breath as the system's defenses fought back. The encryption was thick, layered with failsafes meant to thwart any attempts at unauthorized access. But Ilias had faced tougher odds. He kept his cool, overriding security protocols one by one. Then, finally, a soft ping. The system unlocked. Done, Ilias said, breathing a sigh of relief. But the victory was short-lived. The sound of boots pounding against the floor reached his ears, followed by the unmistakable hum of Dominion combat drones. "We've got company," Meka shouted as she rushed to cover Ilias. "We need to get out, now." Ilias didn't need any more convincing. He grabbed the final data packet from the console, and the team turned, retreating from the command center. The room, once a symbol of Dominion power, now felt like a tomb, a place where the Empire's grip had slipped. But as they fled, the full weight of their mission hit Ilias. The Dominion might have been defeated here, but the war was far from over. They had struck a blow, yes, but they would need to fight every step of the way. And they would, because humanity wasn't finished yet. The corridors of the fortress now felt like a maze of chaos. The rebels moved quickly, the sound of approaching reinforcements echoing through the walls. Ilias could hear the heavy footsteps of Dominion soldiers behind them, and the whir of combat drones getting closer with every passing second. Time was running out. The mission had been a success, but survival was no guarantee. "Keep moving," Ilias barked, leading the charge. He could see the faint glow of the exit just ahead. Behind him, the sound of gunfire reverberated through the hull as the rebels fought their way toward the outer walls. Mika kept her sniper rifle raised, picking off soldiers who dared to approach their path. Her shots were deadly and precise, every one of them a lifeline. "I've got the rear," she called out, her voice sharp. "But we've got incoming aerial support. Dom drones. They're going to be on us any second." Elias's heart raced. The Dominion drones were fast, armed with weapons that could tear through any cover, and their advanced targeting systems made them nearly impossible to evade. But the rebels weren't backing down, not when they had come this far. Zara glanced over her shoulder. "The reinforcements are getting close. We're going to need an exit strategy, fast." Elias reached the exit door, slamming his hand against the release panel. "It's not going to open in time. We'll make a hole instead." He triggered a grenade, hurling it toward the massive fortress gate. The explosion rocked the hallway, sending a shower of debris into the air. For a brief moment, the explosion left them with a thin sliver of opportunity. "Go now!" Elias shouted, ushering his team through the gap in the wall. The rebels rushed through the hole, one by one, narrowly avoiding the storm of gunfire that followed. As they emerged into the open air, they were greeted by the blinding light of the sun rising over the horizon. The vast fortress, once a symbol of the Dominion's unyielding power, was now a broken shell, crumbling before their eyes. But there was no time to rest. As they sprinted toward the extraction point, the unmistakable hum of Dominion gunships filled the air. They were closing in fast. "Hold them off," Elias shouted, diving into a nearby trench for cover. "Zara, you and Mika set up a perimeter. The rest of you, prepare to fight until we get the signal." Zara and Mika scrambled into position, their weapons ready. They fired back with everything they had, buying the rest of the team precious moments. The gunships hovered overhead, their searchlights sweeping the ground, scanning for any signs of the rebels. Elias's hand tightened around his weapon. He couldn't let them get away, not after all they had sacrificed. A low hum reached their ears as the sounds of war grew louder, but then the unmistakable roar of rebel air support pierced the sky. "We've got them," a voice crackled over the comms. "Your ride's inbound. Hold tight." From the clouds above, the rebel airships descended like an avenging storm, swooping down on the Dominion gunships and unleashing a barrage of firepower. The gunships, caught off guard, were quickly neutralized, their systems overloaded by the sheer force of the assault. Elias felt his heart swell with relief. The reinforcements had arrived. The tide had turned. But even as the rebel ships roared overhead, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this battle, this victory, was just the beginning. The Dominion might be fractured, but they were far from defeated. The galaxy was vast, and their enemy was powerful. Yet, as the rebels climbed aboard their ship, looking out at the battlefield that had once been the Dominion's stronghold, Elias knew one thing with absolute certainty. Earth had struck its first real blow against the Empire, and it wouldn't be the last. As the ship soared into the sky, the shattered remnants of the Dominion fortress grew smaller in the distance, but their message had been clear. The rebels had come, and they would not stop until the Empire was no more.